Hello world, this is Yulia from Back to Engineering and welcome to the PyCharm channel. In this video, we're going to be building what could be your very first TensorFlow example. Together, we're going to be building a notebook and going through it step by step. We're going to be using a lot of PyCharm features that help us out along the way, and we're going to discover a lot of TensorFlow fundamentals and best practices. This will be a beginner example to help you get started, and if you're a complete beginner with TensorFlow, make sure you first check out the video we made about TensorFlow fundamentals and high-level concepts to make sure we're on the same page. So without further ado, let's start a new project and let's get coding. The goal for today's video is quite simple. We're going to be taking one of the existing very popular datasets that are often used to show TensorFlow models in action. We're going to be building our own model, trying out a few different variants with different layers and different types of operations. We're going to assess the accuracy and see what are a few strategies we could do to improve this model. And we're going to show you what are considerations you can make along the way, along with some features that can speed up the process. So first thing first, let's start a new project. To make this easier to follow along, we're going to be using a Jupyter Notebook. This allows us to dynamically test every cell of code as we go and see how things are going. So I'm going to give it a name. It also automatically makes a data folder for me and a virtual environment, which will help us containerize the work that we're doing. We can install all our required packages and dependencies in there and make sure that we always have everything that we need for our project to work. We're also using the latest available Python version, and we're building our project. So with the fresh project in PyCharm, we already start with an example notebook. You can see we have a markdown cell and a code cell. This is a very simple print hello. We're going to make our own Jupyter Notebook to get started, and we have a lot of room to play in here. First thing first, we're going to collect the required packages we have, install them on our virtual environment, and make sure they're added to the requirements file so other people, such as yourself, can also try it out in the future. Now you can go through and add your dependencies and the requirement files to start with, or you can just start coding, adding different bits of code that you perhaps find from different tutorials or examples. And you will notice in the IDE that it automatically highlights packages that are not already imported or installed. So you can actually click on the icon just from here and ask Jupyter to add it to your requirements or to install it directly. So we end up with a requirements file that looks a little like this. And along the way, you'll see a lot of these little light bulbs that can make suggestions to either update to the latest version of a package or whenever something is not included to make sure you add it. So once we have all these together, then the cell code should run if all the packages are imported, and we have a sanity statement here to make sure that the right version has been installed. You'll also notice that as we start running through these cells, we start to add variables, and these are stored for us very conveniently over here as well, so we can keep checking what the values are without having to add additional print statements or do extra checks. So let's just get started and load our data. I have picked this data set of fashion items because I think it has a very cool example and the visuals are very helpful for learning. We're just going to be loading it by using the Keras datasets function. There's a lot of available datasets here that you can just call out by name and automatically import them, so you don't have to mess with particular files or building your dataset yourself. And for these, there's a lot of examples out there, so it really helps when you want to build something out that you can take a look at what other variations are out there. We're printing the dimensions of the data, and this is made up of various pictures of fashion items along with the labels that are the category of that feature. And the class names are as follows. You'll see different items as we go. But to make this a little easier, because it's images, let's just look at them. With a simple loop, we can just make a plot. We're using the matplotlib library here, imported as PLT, so you'll see that we call out to this throughout the experiment as we go. This enables us to show the different images we have from our data set. We're also printing the labels on top so we can follow along with these. Now, if you just want to see what the data set looks like directly, that is a little bit more difficult to interpret as it's a very large data. As we've seen, it has 60,000 dimensions. And if we look at a particular example, this is what the representation looks like as a tensor. This is something that, again, we have explained in the introduction video, but we have a multi-dimension type of array that helps us represent an image in terms that the machine learning algorithms can understand later and go on to train our models. So all of these zeros and some of the values that are filled in here represent the different pixels and the information that we want. But of course, looking at them as an actual image plot is a lot easier. The other thing you'll notice is that the range of these values go between 0 and 255. And what we want to do is flatten these to go to a range between 0 and 1, which will again make it easier to train a binary model. So if we look at the same example once again and run this cell, we now have the scalars that are between the range of 0 and 1, and this will really help with the algorithms later. This is why I find it very useful to run through a Jupyter Notebook, because you can just pick apart and show whichever values you want to at any point. Although, again, the other option you have is looking through the variables that we stored in here. You see that the training set also appears over here, and for each array, we have the different elements. So if you want to look at the sixth element in there, it would be this one, and it will have all these different values. Again, just useful to know that you can always peek at these variables as we go. Now let's create our very first model. If we look back at the top, we've already imported the different models and layers options from Keras, and Keras is the library that is recommended to start with for beginners working with TensorFlow because it abstracts away a lot of the complexities. What you'll notice is when you hover over these libraries, you also get these pop-ups that have snippets from the documentation, so you can actually look at it in here while staying in PyCharm without having to open multiple tabs. So if we want to create a model based on the Keras import that we've done, we'll go to models dot, and you'll see that you already get the autocomplete coming in from the documentation of this package. We have the options that we can call out. So in this case, I want to use the sequential, and it also autocompletes with suggestions from the AI assistant at what these type of layers usually look like. And this is, again, pretty standard stuff. It's probably taken from the examples that already exist. We'll have different layers that first flatten the input to fit into the right format that we want, and we'll have a dense layer with a particular algorithm. ReLU is the most popular, and probably a final layer. So what we can do is just hit tab and use this as the input that we want for our model, or write a different one ourselves. Perhaps we have a second model that this time has 2 different dense layers in the middle, so this is a bit more complex, and we can check out later which of them performs better. Now from here, once we've defined these models as model types objects, we also get a lot of other suggestions for what functions we can do next. We can add different layers dynamically from here, or we can start to compile our model. Now, if we hover over this, we see that we need an optimizer as well as a loss function and some metrics, and we have some suggestions in here for what these look like. If you scroll, you also have an example of how this can be used. So to make it really simple, we'll take the 3 basic components that we need, which are the optimizers, Atom being a very popular one, a loss function, and a particular metric that we want to test for, and we're going to go for accuracy. So we've got optimizer Atom, using the defaults that appear over here. And next up, we'll take this model and apply it to our particular data set. So we're going to fit the model to the data that we've just imported, which is, of course, the X train and the Y train. And we also choose the number of epochs or the number of iterations that the model would train over. Again, the default is just 10. So once we try that out, you see that we start to see the different iterations. We see the accuracy and the loss as they're being calculated. And we also see exactly how long it takes for each of these to run. Now let's do the same thing for the second model that we picked just to continue with the comparison. So we're going to compile it. We're going to use the same features and perhaps going to be fitted on the same data, but let's say we'll take 15 epochs to train. So we'll get to see if having an additional layer and letting it train for longer is going to improve the performance. So we'll let this one build out as well. There you go. And after a few seconds, we can now start to evaluate what we've done. So if we do model1.evaluate, and we're going to use the test data for the X and Y as well. And when we run this, we get 2 values. And if we hover over this again, we see that the result is the scalar total loss along with the feature that we picked. And in our case, that is accuracy. So we're going to say loss and accuracy to store these results. Save these for the first model. And you see we also get a recommendation of how to print this in a nicely formatted way. And then we also get the loss to and accuracy to for our second model that we've run. So if we copy this over, we're going to be showing the 2 different metrics. And we see that the accuracy of the first model is 0.88, and the accuracy of the second model is just slightly a little bit better, but we actually used a lot longer time to train it. So in this case, I'm not sure that it's 100% worth it, but just something to play with. Now let's zoom out and think about what this number actually represents. It's close to 1, so that's a good thing. A score of 1 would be perfect, but this actually means that from out of all the examples, most of them will get categorized correctly with the correct label for that image. We can take a look at what this looks like visually as well. So I've put together a quick function with a plot option that will allow us to take a look at what the prediction and the ground truth actually was for some of these images. So you see that we have the pictures the same as we did in the beginning, and we have the ankle boot. In this case, it was correct. I think actually most of these examples have been accurately predicted. So let's try to test the next 16 till 32. Over here, we have an ankle boot that's been guessed as a pullover, pair of trousers that's been guessed as a bag. So looking around, we're also able to get a look at what the correct and incorrect predictions actually look like. Obviously, most of them will be correct since our accuracy is quite high. Of course, you can still put this all together with the various functionalities that we have from the matplotlib library. So we can look at metrics that are more relevant and calculated with both the predictions and the ground truth, such as the precision, recall, F1 scores, and so on and so forth. So we can actually see that our model performs different based on different labels. The trousers are a lot more easily identified, for example, than the shirt, which gets a lot more confusion. And with the human interpretation, of course, that kind of makes sense. Shirts and pullovers might look more similar, whereas trousers are their own category and they're more distinct from the other types of labels. And while that makes sense intuitively, let's actually test out with the data. And this time I'm actually going to use the AI assistant, because this is something that you could easily put together, or at the very least check that it makes sense and is correct. There's a lot of very accessible documentation for plots and a lot of examples. So what you would normally do in this case is go yourself and look up different examples and build them up together. This can just save us a lot of time. So I'll say build a new plot. All right, so we have build a new plot that shows the confidence in the various labels for different images. I want to start with the grid of, well, I meant to say 16 examples and show the confidence that we have in each of these labels. Now, I'm hoping that this shows what my intuition was as well, that if we have something like a shirt, it can more easily be confused with a pullover. And you see that the model just generated something for me, and it's actually quite a lot of code. But let's first see if this works. I'm going to apply it, which should add the snippet at the end of my code here. And I can run it. And this does indeed do what I wanted, but it's probably way more complex than I actually needed or would have written myself. So I'll say simplify this to the bare bones option. All right, so I'll ask it to simplify this. And there we go. We have a way shorter proposal. I'll try by pasting this in here. And there we go. We have a few examples for us to look through. And I will say pick a few examples when the labels were wrong. And I find this very useful to use when you're doing something like writing queries or making graphs or something that you're more familiar with. It's just a matter of getting the documentation together. I would maybe trust it less when it comes to making decisions or using tools that I'm not myself familiar with yet, because then you're not going to learn it very fast. But if you're new to TensorFlow and you want to focus on building that and understanding that, you can write those bits yourself and still use the assistant to speed along the process. So there we go. If we look at some of the examples that we got wrong, we have a pullover that was meant to be a coat, but it was the second guess of the model, so that's quite okay. And here we had quite a bit of uncertainty. Our votes were split amongst different labels, but the shirt was the correct one. So again, we see more of the tops being the problem, and that is what our intuition told us as well as the accuracy for that particular column. And there you have it. We've run through an entire TensorFlow example together. Of course, we've only scratched the surface, but we've covered a lot of the really good basics. We've imported a dataset and looked at it together. We've trained a model, or actually two, with different strategies for a number of layers, as well as a number of iterations in our training. We've taken a look at our results and dug a little deeper into what these mean for our data. We've taken a look at some of the images and how the labels work or not, and where the confusion may be coming from. And we've used some of the AI functionalities to help us along the way and speed up the process. So you're now well on your journey to using TensorFlow and building your own deep learning models. Hope you found this video useful. Take a look at some of the other amazing videos we have here on the PyCharm channel. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.